Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleague and everybody, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants and panelists. So welcome to this EVALSDG and gLOCAL event in partnership with the UNICEF Innovation Office, the Academy, International Academy, and welcome. So we have this topic is the title is about from capacity towards strengthening evaluation capabilities and anchoring evaluation into modern public management. So we have very interesting panelists. Maybe they have together they brought maybe more than 100 years of experience, but I can guarantee you they are very young and in their spirit and their heart. So let me do a quick introduction. You have their bio in the post, in the EVALSDG post. But first, Madame Celeste Giano, she's a professor and researcher in the field of state and government planning and evaluation of public policies and government of the province of Cordoba and universities of Argentina. We have Mr. Jan Goldman, who is the president of the International Evaluation Academy and an adjunct professor at the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance, University of Cape Town. We have Mr. Gonzalo Hernandez Licona, director of the Multidimensional Poverty Network, and Gonzalo is a Mexican economist. We have Mr. Emmanuel Jimenez, Emmanuel or Manny, is Director General and Independent Evaluation Department of the Asian Development Bank. We have Madame Patricia Moreno, Deputy Director of Evaluation of the Directorate of Monitoring and Evaluation of Public Policies of the National Planning Department in Colombia. We have Dr. Marie-Hélène Adrien. She's a seasoned senior evaluator with more than 35 years of experience and specialized in institutional assessment and partnership evaluation. We have also Mr. Thomas Rossmiller. Rossmiller is a partnership specialist in the evaluation office UNICEF, and myself, Denis Jobin, I'm senior evaluation specialist in the evaluation office UNICEF here in New York. So that's the introduction of the panel. So let me just maybe start with the next slide. Maybe if you want. So the issue here. So we're going to introduce, first we have, this is the program of work. We have first the introduction and welcome that I just did. We are going to introduce the topic, 5 minutes per panelist approximately. And then we're going to have more time for several Q&As with the audience and with the discussant among ourselves. So we want to have an interactive session among the panelists and with the participants online. Then a closing remark done by the EVALSDG new co-chair, which is Dr. Marie-Hélène Adrien. So next slide. So what is the issue here? So the issue here, there's over the year there were many investment. We talk about national evaluation capacities, and we invest over and over into capacities. What are those capacities? They are investment in training and capacities in doing survey, designing evaluation, designing survey methodologies, design, experimental design. Without maybe paying much attention to how these investment in capacities in asset at the individual, organizational, or institutional level can be put into action and move into having a vibrant, healthy evaluation function as part of public modern management, as part of what we call the machinery of government as well. So what do we mean by capacities? So capacities are the skill, the asset at the individual, training, competencies, organizational guidance, book, policies, institutional level, national evaluation policy, and framework, governance framework that govern the evaluation function, which is the function of modern public management. While the capabilities is maybe to the ability to put these assets into motion, to deliver actually, and to have transformational change, to make sure that evaluation contribute to change and to service delivery and to performance of government and service delivery, and change in what government ought to achieve, especially the SDGs. There's a need to have a more balanced focus between both. We're not saying that capacities is not important. It is important, but we cannot do it at the expense of ignoring the capabilities, as it is in my own view for the last decade or so. There's also several traps in the capabilities. It has been brought up by a very interesting book on building state capabilities from the MIT, I believe, team. Some of these traps are prematurely load-bearing, so we come up with a model, a good practice, and we load it to the government, hoping that they're going to be able to just do it without thinking, are they capable of implementing the good practice in terms of implementation science of once you have a policy, are we able to implement it? What does it mean in terms of governing plan, governing budget, and so on, so forth, so on. Isomorphic mimicry. We're going to take a model, we're going to take Canada's model, and we're going to bring it in Nigeria. It doesn't work. There's specificity context that that needs to be respected. We need to be context specific. Also, it's important to pay attention to the incentive structure and to make sure that we sometimes we push, we want short-term results, and we want to make sure that the way the development aid sector is, we want to have something measurable that is short-term, that we can see, we can report back, while sometimes building capabilities take decades. It takes time. Next slide, please. So the issue is really to think about how does it fit evaluation as a function of modern public man? What does it mean? What we refer often as the machinery of government. How does those line ministries, state agents, organization, and fit together to deliver an evaluation function along the budget plan, along performance management and learning, allocation, human resource competencies? How do we connect all those systems and subsystems of modern public management and the machinery of government that allow governments to set up a system to be performant and at the end of the day to achieve SDG, to make change for their citizens, build trust, achieve service delivery, improve health, improve education, and so forth, so on. There's different system and subsystem, and I mentioned a couple in this slide, but we have the supreme audit institution, the parliament, the executive, the legislative, and so forth, so on. So I will stop there, and the panelists will take some question and angle from this problem statement and presentation. So I will invite the next panelists to come in. And I believe it is, yeah.
It's me, I think.
Yeah. Gonzalo, over.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much to be here with very good friends and extraordinary evaluators. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. So a very important question from what Danny already said is how to make sure, how to know that all these elements that Danny just mentioned are happening in countries. How can we make sure that not only we have evaluations, but these are used and these are shared between government, Congress, and all. So how can we know that? And as you know, fortunately, we have various tools of measuring many systems for the past 30 years. But nevertheless, the Global Evolution Initiative wanted to have its own way of trying to understand how the systems work in countries, and therefore the GI develops, and Ian was an important part of it. Ian, my friend who is here, and myself and others, we developed a very interesting tool called the MESA, Monitoring and Evaluation Systems Analysis. And the main idea of the MESA is, in a nutshell, is how can we observe and understand what is happening in countries, coming from in a collaborative way between GI partners and governments, owned by governments, to know what they are doing, how they do things, and how can we help in a collaborative way to improve, to strengthen the M&E system. And let me just share with you quickly this slide showing the main idea. I mean, the main idea of the MESA is how can we make sure to understand what is happening not only on the supply side of evaluations, because sometimes what we have is that we have well-trained evaluators in countries. We have very good evaluations with great methodological processes, but then it is an isolated thing because it doesn't go to other departments. It doesn't go to Congress. People don't understand why do we have an isolated evaluation unit. And therefore, we need to understand, I mean, things like the structure of government, the political economy, the culture of organization, how policies are implementing, how the planning and the budgeting is taking place in the country. Sometimes the budgeting takes place on the Ministry of Finance, and sometimes, many times, they don't use the evaluations that are produced in the country, sometimes in the department, which is 2 blocks away from the Ministry of Finance. So how can we make sure that all these elements come together? And therefore, the MESA is, I think, a very nice tool which complements other tools in trying to understand that. So just to finishing, because I have a short time, the main work in MESA is about the S letter, the systems. So we talk about evaluation, monitoring, and the rest of the system. So we should talk about improving capacities and capabilities, which is the power or the ability to accomplish and use evaluations in the decision-making process. So we invite you to visit the MESA and to learn about the MESA. Thank you very much, Denny.
Thank you, Gonzalo. So our next panelist, maybe Patricia.
Thank you, Denis. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the experience of Colombia. In Colombia, we have made some progress in integrating evaluation into the public management process through different actions. On the first place, we annually build a strategic evaluation agenda that seeks to generate evidence for decision-making process and to advance towards the efficiency of public spending. Within this process, priority is given to those interventions that, in addition to being strategic for the country, we know that will have a potential use and will respond with relevance and timeliness to the information and evidence required of the stakeholders involved. During all this evaluation process, we engage these relevant stakeholders in order to have all the necessary information that we need, but also for all the stakeholders to take ownership of the evaluation results and recommendations, and to try to conduct an evaluation with relevance and opportunity. When the evaluation is completed, we start a process of socialization and dissemination. All this process that I've just mentioned is established in a decree that was issued like 8 years ago. Secondly, we have recently been working with the support of Gonzalo, with the support of the Global Evaluation Initiative, in different strategies that seek to continue integrating evaluation into the public management, and that right now are part of a public policy document. So this year we adjusted our evaluation cycle to align it with the budget cycle. And the main reason is that we were providing evidence several months after the budget discussions. Now, with this new alignment, we hope to provide this evidence a few months before the budget discussions begins. And we are also working in strengthening our relation with the Ministry of Finance. We are also designing a monitoring system of the implementation of the recommendations of the evaluations. And with this monitoring system, we expect to increase the use of evaluations, given that the entities can feel more committed to use the evaluations. And in addition, we will also know who is using our evaluations. So we are going also to try to build an evaluation usage index. So this is going to be a really important information for us. And we have also developed a document that summarized the main results and recommendations of all the evaluations that were conducted during 2018-2022. This document was delivered to this new government that it's not that new. It started in 2022, but it was an input for the construction of the National Development Plan. So these are like the new or recent actions that we've been working with the Global Evaluation Initiative. But despite the efforts, we still have a long way to go, and we have many challenges ahead. We really need that our evaluations really influence budget decisions. We need this to truly be integrated into the process instead of depending on people's interests or will. So we know that we have this huge challenge, and we know that we need to create different institutional and regulatory mechanisms that can allow us to continue integrated evaluation into the public management. And I think this is a huge challenge that we are facing right now, but we just started to work on it, and I hope that we are going to have very, very good results. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Celeste. Let's continue. Very interesting to bring the Colombia rich experience. Let's continue with the next panelist, which is Patricia. I'm sorry, Patricia. Now it's Celeste. Sorry.
Thank you, Denny. Thank you to UNICEF Evaluation Office for this invitation, for giving us some food for thought in this moment in this panel. So I would like to share my screen, just one slide, to talk about how evaluation systems support evidence-based policymaking, accountability, transparency, etc. So I would like to share with you, let me put, yeah, that's one, yeah. I think we all share this framework, you know, the Eval Agenda 2020, and going on with these 3 pillars: individual capacities for evaluation, institutional capacities, and the enabling environment for evaluation. So with this framework, thinking about the wide concept about system evaluations, we need to think about the pillars and the way that this kind of system help, you know, and goes on to supporting the governments and the different stakeholders. So as you may know, we have some diagnostics in Latin America. We have tried the first NEC panorama in 2015. We have, of course, the MESA, as Gonzalo said. We have the INSE and the interaction between them. So we have a great experience now in Latin America, as Patty said, in measuring evaluation systems. But as Dennis said and Gonzalo said, we are not thinking only about evaluation systems. We need to think about the great system, you know, the integrated system between evaluation, planning, and all the context. So my last 3 minutes, I would like to go to the civil society, thinking, of course, especially in BOPIs and academia and the interaction between them, helping with contributing with standards, with training, and generating new regional and local frameworks, you know, to this that I love to say, the evaluation ecosystems, you know. So thinking about the ecosystem, I would like to say that the evaluation system can support evidence-based policymaking and etc. Reducing, reusing, and recycling. For example, thinking in reducing, evaluation system help not duplicating efforts and agreeing on concrete actions. for example, with multi-stakeholder spaces. Reusing, thinking in the pool of local knowledge we have. We have a lot of local knowledge we need to interact with and put with the evaluation knowledge, to develop, of course, use-led evaluation. You know that a great awareness we have every time is thinking about the use of the result of our evaluations. So if we want to work with and use our evaluations, we need to put our local knowledge there, and thinking about appropriation, and legitimation of our processes in the community. And the third one is recycling, and we all know about that our communities with our local knowledge are giving new understandings to traditional terms, of course, like some criteria, some terms, some concepts like development, effectiveness, and impact, and giving new understanding to new methodologies and guidelines. This is to talk about sustainability, the sustainability of our evaluation systems. We think that evaluation system could help our policy making and, of course, our democracies. So those are my 5 minutes, and I would love to continue talking in the question and answer moment. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Celeste. Very interesting. I like the ecosystem and the zooming, the expansion to the zooming beyond the public government. So our next panelist is Dr. Jan Goldman. Over to you, dear Jan.
So hi, everybody. So my background is actually running the evaluation system in South Africa, but since leaving government in 2018, we did this research which led to this book on lessons from different African countries on trying to get evidence into use, which quite a lot was evaluation, but not only evaluation evidence. And this is based on 8 case studies. And so I wanted to, as some of the other speakers have raised, it's not just the ability to generate evaluation, it's the capability to use evaluation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we need to link that with motivation, capability, and opportunity. And this framework, first of all, what is the context that we're operating in, the external context, the relationship between state, non-state agents, the broader leadership that's happening, and then internal dimensions to particular organizations, the culture, the type of leadership internally, etc. And then is there demand for evidence? And assuming that there is that demand, how can we use that demand to try and improve the development impact? And we're hoping that evidence use will try and improve that impact, and that could be at an individual level or an organizational level or system level. And the key issue I want to raise is that to get that use, we have to get the motivation to use the evidence, we have to have the capability to generate and use the evidence, and we need the opportunity to use the evidence. So we need those 3 elements of a system for that capability to for evidence to be actually used. And in this framework, we talk about these change mechanisms. This is a behavior change framework where we need to build awareness, we need to build agreement, we need to have access to the evidence, we need to build interaction and trust, we need to build the ability of the suppliers and the users, and we have to find ways to institutionalize and formalize. And we're familiar to thinking about that from the evidence generation side, generating evaluations or research or whatever, and issues around quality and timeliness, etc. But what we also talk a lot in the book is about what we call use interventions, the things that you do to create an environment where people will actually use that evidence, which will generate the awareness, which will generate the agreement. So whether it's capacity building, whether it's breakfasts with ministers, building repositories, the things that you do, these use interventions, and becoming proactive in thinking about use interventions, not just the supply of evidence, but the use interventions that we have to build so that evidence is likely to be used. And what I want to just raise then is that in this research, we came up with a number of key use interventions that came out, which were associated with a national evaluation system. Having a system like in national evaluation plans where there's demand from government, the way you use evaluation steering committees to manage in a collaborative way, building ownership by the collaborating partners of the evaluation, the type of knowledge brokering or process facilitation which the central government is doing to manage the supply side, manage the demand side, and get the two to link. Capacity building, how you use independent evaluators to ensure credibility, how you try and make sure that evaluation reports are actually readable. In South Africa, we had this 1-page, 5-page, 25-page report which had to be done, which really made a difference in people actually using the evaluations, whether there's a management response and an improvement plan, whether the reports are public on the website so that all actors can get them. And in our case, in South Africa, we had approval by cabinet, so that this gave quite a lot of weight to the evaluations. So there are also a lot of other factors which were not outside the national evaluation systems, things like building coalitions, things like having proactive outreach and engagement with communities, a variety of dialogue methods, including debates and one-to-one meetings. I mean, meetings with key stakeholders to brief them on the evidence so that they're open to the findings. These are some of the ways that you can do it. So just to reiterate the message, that we need to build the motivation, we need to build the capability, we need to build the opportunity, and we need to think very consciously, not just about the generation of the evidence, but about the use interventions which help to make that evidence usable, and that stakeholders have the capability to actually the capability and the motivation to actually use that evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for sharing your thought and insight, and the book is very useful, and it's in the open domain, so very encouraging. So the first block was the perspective of government a bit. That's how we try to organize it. So now we move to the next panelist with the second block of panelists that we try now to give maybe an international organization or international perspective from the government page or experience. So our next panelist is Emmanuel Jimenez. Yeah, over to you, Emmanuel.
Thanks very much. And I really appreciate the insights that I've gotten, certainly just in the short time that I've been in this panel, from my colleagues on the Patricia, Celeste, and Ian on the Latin America and the Africa perspectives. Let me share with you some reflections thinking about Asia, because that's the region that I inhabit. And it's really interesting to me how, in a way, despite the fact that many of these economies are really fast growing, they seem to be a little bit more behind the systems approach on evaluation that relative to Latin America and Africa. Let me just share with you some findings. They're not mine. They're from a book on the institutionalization of evaluation by Reinhard Stockmann and colleagues in Germany. They didn't do a MESA, Ian and Gonzalo, but they did take some of the, looked at some of the characteristics on country context and what's happening on the ground. And there's a lot of overlap with what Denis mentioned about what he calls capabilities in evaluation. And let me just give you a few of the salient points about what characterizes the systems here in Asia. One is that the formalization in terms of laws or decrees or regulations in building evaluation in government systems is very nascent in this region. There are no legal requirements for evaluation, for example, even though some are trying. And what there is seems to be evaluations in planning ministries in particular, because they need to show the government that these plans have objectives that can be monitored over time. So the legal system and the is very nascent. The second thing that they point out is that there are individual ministries, of course, that have evaluation units, but they're not coordinated into a whole, so that their ability to feed into the budget process is quite limited. Also, what evaluation is done seems to be driven by outsiders. That the evaluations of donor-led projects are much more advanced than those in national governments. And finally, none of the evaluations are independent. They're all within government, and not even in the parliamentary systems, which might be independent of government, are very few and far between. So I think that the overall picture in Asia is one that there is evaluation taking place, but it's a mixed bag. It's uncoordinated, and I don't see the kind of systems that both Celeste and Ian seem to be describing just yet in this region. But I do think that there are opportunities here as well. I'm here in Sri Lanka, where there are champions, including the president himself, who has been trying to push evaluation. But I think that the community here, for example, is trying to make sure that when they have this narrow window of opportunity, when there are champions, they'll try to formalize an evaluation system and make it into law. So I think it's just very interesting to see that the different regions have different entry points. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Manny, for your very rich perspective and your observation about the different region. And yes, there's different maybe governance model for within which the evolution is thriving. Next panelist, we'll welcome back Gonzalo, if he can give us a perspective, please.
Thank you, Danny. Just following what Manny said about Asia, let me just reflect a little bit about Latin America. I believe that the Latin American experience is interesting because we had a boom of evaluations in the 90s. And then since then, we've been increasing the level and the quality of the evaluations and the system and the M&A system. So it is interesting to see the evolution of Colombia, of Chile, of course, Costa Rica, Argentina, Mexico. So it's been a boom and a rapid increase of the evaluation process. But I believe that in Latin America, we started with two original themes, or two original facts. One is that the entry point for evaluation was the academia. So we were very interested in having very good evaluations and methodologically extraordinary and impact evaluations. So everything started, from my point of view in general, from the academia. And therefore, when we talk about capacities in terms of evaluation, our first thing in our mind were we have to produce very good evaluations. In fact, my first training as being of the head of evaluation unit in the Ministry of Social Development was an impact evaluation training for 2 weeks, right? But then later, we have to learn about the politics and the communication process along the way, giving us crashes with people. And therefore, that's our first thing. And the second thing is that in Spanish, we don't have a different word for capacities and capabilities. Everything is capacitación, right? And therefore, because we don't have the other one, we forget about the capability part. Meaning, it's not enough to have evaluations in the evaluation unit. It's not enough to have wonderful evaluations, methodologically good evaluations, if we are not able to communicate them, if we are not able to see if we're not able to have the power, the capability of the whole system, or as Celeste is insisting a lot, which is she's right, is the ecosystem. I mean, the difference between the system is we have many these systems, and sometimes they don't connect between each other. The ecosystem is about the interaction about the actors of the evaluation process in this case. And therefore, as Ian was saying, I just finished by saying the challenges, and as Patricia was saying, is how can we understand better how the decision-making process is actually doing in countries? Therefore, we can insert our evaluations there. We need to have very good motivations and incentives, as Ian was saying. If we don't have, even if we have the legal elements there, if we don't have the incentives and the motivations, then the legal doesn't work. And of course, the communication process going beyond the R squares and the deviation from the mean stuff, we need to communicate better in order for the ecosystems to interact better. Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Last panelist on this blog before we open up, and Mariana, you can take over after that, perhaps. Celeste is the last panelist on this blog. Respond to the comment you received. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have prepared some insights, but yeah, hearing Gonzalo, Ian, Manny, Patricia, well, a lot of things come to my mind. But I have a question from Maria Helen that I would like to mix here because they are so related. Thinking about our ecosystems and the academia, and we have here in Latin America in this moment a lot of support from international cooperation related to governments, as Patricia said, and related to certificates or diplomas or short courses to help publications to be more professionalized in evaluation. But I would like to say that we need not to forget, as Gonzalo said, the academia and the products of academia, and this interaction and this need that we have to equilibrate. I don't know if the word it's okay, between the government knowledge, and because I'm a trainer in government too, and the researching and the frameworks that we can give from universities, from the academia. So maybe here is one of the things that I would like to highlight about the articulating some stakeholders, and make it more equity. And thinking about, because all is about our evaluation ecosystems and the sustainability, because enable this environment is the important thing. And I had a question before about learning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and how can we learn from evaluation, and even learning from failures. And I remember here in Bolivia, one of the BOPE with young and emerging evaluators made that, I'm sorry for the word, but they made the fuck off night. I'm sorry. But yeah, they learn about the mistakes in evaluation processes, that is what we need, innovation in evaluation, and sharing and learning one each other. So thinking about collective design, thinking about, as I said, the local knowledge system, we need to share more information, more contextualized information, and interact with the knowledge in evaluation processes. So thinking about having a coherent ecosystem, as I think Maria Helen said, I would like to say that we need to be more equilibrated, in our different dimensions, not only the structure, the institutional structure, not only the academia, not only the government, but we need to be more equity there. VOPIs, for example, civil society. So this is my struggle and a lot of thoughts, but yeah. And the last one I would like to share is that maybe we need to go beyond the training since evaluation processes, and going to, as Gonzalo says and Patricia says, planning and evaluation, but maybe, for example, how to develop success networkings, and maybe how to prepare and receive multiple international support, because in sometimes governments has multiple international support, and we need to know, and governments need to know how to use it in the better way. So this is sustainability of evaluation systems, I think. Thank you.
Marie-Hélène, over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And it's absolutely exciting to hear very different views and very different perspectives. And my role is perhaps to start engaging the different panelists in some questions. So my first question will be directed to both Ian and to Gonzalo. And the question goes like this: what role can civil society play in ensuring that building capacities and building capabilities go hand in hand rather than existing in silo? We've discussed quite a lot this notion that the two needs to be integrated. So what would be the role, from your view, the role that CSOs can play in that regard? Over to you. Maybe we'll start with Ian, followed by Gonzalo.
So the capacity side, I think, you've obviously got the role of universities, et cetera, and building that. But in the capability side, I think the VOPEs have a very big role to play. And I mean, just as a practical example, I was on the board of the South African M&E Association until last October. And we worked extensively with the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation on developing the way evaluation could focus on the just transition. And we developed with the department through a hackathon, actually, and through working with multiple participants. We developed a criteria on climate and ecosystems health, and a criteria on transformative equity, and then guidelines for how these could be applied in evaluations. And the department then issued these, and we're now working to pilot these guidelines, working with the department to pilot them, and working to see how we can build the capability to actually apply these. And at the CEMEA conference in October this year, that's going to be a major part of the conference, is how can we start adopting these guidelines in all evaluations. So, thanks.
And let me take a second point of view, which I believe that, in countries where democracy is vibrant, it means that civil society is vibrant. And therefore, the civil society is pushing government and pushing public servants, pushing to get results and to get transparency. That was very clear in Mexico and other Latin American countries. When democracy started fully, let's say, then you started looking at both Congress and civil society from different regions and points, asking for transparency, asking for results, asking for measurement and evaluation. In fact, in the Mexican case, the idea of Coneval came from the transparency process pushed by society. And therefore, that has pushed many elements in some of our countries. And therefore, the VOPEs that we have, there are very good windows for the voices of that civil society that is pushing for results and for transparency. And that means that not only we need to produce evaluations, we need to use them in a sensible way.
Thank you to both Ian and Gonzalo. I'll turn the question to Celeste, who just began in her last enunciation to discuss the role of academia. So we've heard what the VOPE can do. What about the role of academia in ensuring that both academia, both CSOs and government work hand in hand? Do you have a role to play, or have you played a role in doing such a thing? Over to you, Celeste.
Yeah, thank you, Maria Helen, for your question. And I'd love to talk about academia because, yeah, I'm really involved there. Yeah, and, for example, we have now in some measurements that we are doing, and we are sharing the results with academia. For example, in the case of INSE, I remember now, we are trying to share this information, like MESA information, like all the results we have to be read or analyzed from the academia, from the students, from different group of researchers, and why? Because we need a good information and read it from different frameworks, and academia is prepared for that. This is the first one. The second one is that, as I made in my PhD thesis from 2019, I studied 39 training programs in evaluation in Latin America. And in that moment, we had a lot of, training in methodologies, in quantitative and qualitative methodologies and process evaluation, but nothing about aptitude, as you would say, not aptitude, but attitude is the attitude from people engaging with communities, So, and this is one of the things we have in our evaluation standards, for example, for Latin America. So that was a very a thing to highlight, And so I tried to write about the evaluators' profile in that work. And at last, as a product, something that I never published, but I'm sharing now, is a kind of decalogue of training and evaluation programs not for training, but for the trainers, for the programs. And the three last points were about networking, because we need to be updated, we need to share information, we need to be prepared and being part of that evaluation ecosystem as academia, So this is one of the, I think those are a lot of kind of activities we need to do and we have to share from the academia in this at this point. I don't know if I answered. Sorry, Maria.
You did, Celeste, quite well, actually, and we see a clear role for CSOs, for academia, for associations. And yet, despite this advocacy and the support, there's still an ongoing investments that are being made by funders for individual capacity building versus capabilities. So the question is why? So we've heard from many that there is an issue of the readiness of the countries, so that some of the contexts are more, conducive to having their capabilities being built. And we've heard another example from Patricia. So my questions will be for both Patricia and for Emmanuel. And the question is, despite those examples where we see that it is actually important to build capabilities, why do donors still like to continue to invest in individual capacities? Is it because there is a lack of trust in the government systems? Or is it because the funders actually like to be able to see very tangible and clear results that they can share with their constituency? Or maybe there's another reason for that. So I'd like to hear your views, and then we'll start with Patricia from Colombia, Latin America. We'll turn to Asia. Patricia, over to you.
Thank you, Maria Helen. I think that, I'm not sure, but I think that when you try to build capacities, you will see results maybe in a short term, and you're going to see results easier than when you try to build capabilities. And also, I think that this aspect of trying to build capabilities is something that we are starting to talk about recently. Because before we tried always we were focused in Colombia to try to work in capacities, to do more evaluations with very quality. And I think that in Colombia, like we forgot about the importance of also working in capabilities. Now in Colombia, we know the importance of capacities and capabilities. So now we need this support, not only in building capacities, but also in building capabilities.
On you, Marie-Hélène.
It is newer, and it is actually perhaps easier to measure capacities than capabilities. What would Manny say? What would be your perspective and some challenges that you would see? Over to you.
I would agree 100% with what Patricia mentioned. We tend to do things that are easier and have what we know how to do well. Why do we keep having training workshops as the solution to everything? And that's something that I've seen. But let me say a couple of things that I think at least the multilateral development banks are trying to do or can do on the capability side. One is that all of these banks lend money for what they call public sector management reform. It's not easy, but these are loans to improve how the public sector functions in these countries. Now, most of them are about civil service reform, salary, and so on and so forth. And it's not yet the case that they're building an evaluation system, but I think that's a real opportunity. And if the finance ministry actually borrows money for this, it shows a real commitment, and there have been some indications that that's the case. The other thing is that, as I said before, what that book that I mentioned found on institutionalizing evaluation is that when donors are involved in their own projects, they have to do evaluations. And when they're jointly done by government, and government actually then by default is also doing their own evaluation of that same project. And so when the donors do their own evaluations of their own projects, well, that shows a very good demonstration of what can be done. Because by default, these joint projects are being evaluated because we are answerable to our boards of directors. So I think that by lending money and by doing our own evaluations well, we sort of have this external effect on the countries.
Thank you very much, Manny. I'm reading the chat and I'm seeing that for some people, some are, as they say, training, skeptics because they understand training is easy, changing system is more complex. We'll go with the easier route rather than the long route. But yet there's the SDGs are right around the corner. And if we want to achieve the SDGs, we're clear and certain that we cannot simply focus on individual capacities, but we need to move to the level of capabilities. Denis, do you have any perspective coming from the UN about why there is still an emphasis on building capacities? Do the things that we've heard, the issue around easy versus long-term, do they resonate from the UNICEF's perspective? Over to you.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène. Yes, let me come in. Yes, they do resonate. I do think I will agree with what I've heard so far. It's we go often for the low-hanging fruit. It's easy to report. We go for easy to report, easy to measure training. It's maybe there's a path dependency as well. We've been doing training, part of the development business for decades, and it's we have our package, we have our training, our model, so it's easy to deliver. And there's a pressure in the development business, and I see it in UNICEF having a role at the country level we have pressure, especially in UNICEF, to save life of children. And when there's an emergency, the 48 hours are very important, and the first 2-3 days, and we have protocol and standard for that, responding with nutrition, with life-saving intervention. And when I'm part of a program like social policy or evaluation, that we do upstream work and we do governance building system, it takes years and decades. And it takes many years for me, and I've seen my former colleague in Nigeria, part of the participant, we take 7-8 years to start initiating to build a national evaluation policy. And that was quick. So yes, so there's a short-term versus long-term pressure, and easy to measure and to report back. We need to show result annually, right? Because we're budget annually. Over.
So Denis, just to continue, and maybe to any others, we're here talking about crisis situations, and many of these evaluations are being done in fragile states, in crisis, in emergencies, where there is a very clear need for individual capacity buildings. How do you manage not to forget at the same time in those countries the need for longer term capability building? So how do you manage to have both in a crisis context? Anyone from our panel first, and then we'll turn over to the general audience here, may have an idea about this issue of managing and balancing capacities and capabilities in urgency in fragile states. Yes, Gonzalo.
I mean, I would say something similar as what Denis was saying is, sometimes as international institutions, we talk about, we think about emergency, we think about the helping and all that. And we forgot about the institutional capacity building within countries, right? Because that is more difficult, it takes more time, and that's not an emergency, right? I mean, institutions are about strong collaborative links, and therefore I truly believe that, I mean, Haiti is a very good example, that there's a lot of help coming, an urgency, but there's very little capability building or institutional building in Haiti, and therefore this is a good example where we need to do more as international organizations in thinking about the longer term, even that is not an emergency.
Thank you for
An
your
immediate
perspective,
emergency, right?
Gonzalo. We have 3 hands raised. So first, Manny, Ian, and Denis. Over to you, Manny.
Yeah, thanks. The point you raised about crisis, Marie-Hélène, is an interesting one, because I think that the kind of reforms we are talking about, in both capacity and capability, take a lot of time to show results. And during crisis situations, donors in particular don't feel they have time. And so I think it would be hard to undertake that. I think that, for example, one of the main things that people talked about in capability is what are the incentives built into government systems so that they take the results of evaluation into account in policy making. Is it the case that when an evaluation finding finds that a project is not working, that the project manager is supported or is punished? And if they're being punished, the incentive is not to do the evaluation. So these are long-term institutional issues, which I'm not sure can be addressed during crises very easily.
We have a few more hands that are being raised, so I'm going to go to Ian, Denis, and then Dr. Zakari. Ian, over to you.
So I mentioned in the chat that one of the things that we did was to try and create an environment that decision makers were looking at the learning potential of evaluations and not seeing it in punitive ways. We developed this 2.5-day course for the top 3 levels of the public service, and we trained about 350 of these, and that made a very big difference. And in fact, one of my jobs as head of the evaluation was to try and convince directors general that we weren't trying to punish. We were trying to improve. And that was a lot of my work, was trying to create that trust. But also when we did this course, one of the things we did was, the end of the course, we did a session. We basically used the policy cycle, and we looked at how you would use evidence around the policy cycle. And at the end, we gave groups 3 scenarios. You have 2 years to design something, you know, program's going to end, you know it's going to end, you can prepare it. You've got 6 months, or you've got 2 weeks. And that they had to apply these tools and this thinking about using the, you know, using the evidence cycle for 2 weeks, just as much as if you had 2 years. You just did it in a different way. So trying to get people to think that, you know, that it's the mode of thinking you should always apply. You just got to apply it differently if you've got a short space of time and a long space of time.
Thank you, Ian, for this insight. Denis, over to you, and then Dr. Zakari.
Okay, rapidly. Thank you, Marianne, for the good question. And this came up actually in 2 recent evaluations I managed, the building capacities in a fragile state. And it's a huge dilemma for UNICEF, and actually a reputation risk, because what we observe is there's a risk for UNICEF to be seen as taking side of government in a fragile state. So we're kind of a dilemma. I don't know if it's a variation of the Good Samaritan dilemma, but it's something that we struggle as an organization, and we have been criticized in many cases for this program. So I just want to highlight, in addition of the short-term, long-term tension, we cannot build capacity. So capacity and capabilities does not matter no more, because we're seen as taking side. In Yemen, we work with both parties, but that's easy. There's 2 governments in Yemen. Over.
Thank you very much. I'll turn over to Dr. Zakari. Please unmute. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And permit me to say that this drive, you know, of looking at capacities, capability for evaluation, especially within the context of the public sector, I think is a step in the right direction. I say this because I have was an evaluation, monitoring evaluation manager for the government of Nigeria for about 13 years. And really, you know, making, you know, moving, you know, evaluation from the theoretical issues to practical issues, you know, is especially within the public sector. Because people in government always see an evaluation as something as a standalone process. And that makes, you know, it's very important, you know, in putting, you know, this evaluation perspective in the public sector actors. That's why I consider this initiative very good. For now that, you know, we are looking at evaluation sector, the context. It's step in the right direction, because while in our there, you know, we built, you know, evaluation process, built, you know, evaluation guidelines, even conducted, you know, some evaluations. But the bottom line for the success is that synergy between, you know, the institutions within the government and partners going to work together, so that whatever it is, so that the evaluation.
So you're bringing together, Dr. Zakari, a point that I think we're trying to actually bring even stronger in this webinar, is the issue of partnerships and working hand in hand between all parties, so that governments, civil society, donors, academia do not continue to work in silos. And that's a theme that is starting to emerge from the discussion. So thank you so much for your input. Let me ask that anybody who would like to either share an experience or build upon something that has already been discussed, or ask a question, simply raise your hand or ask a question in the chat. So Gonzalo, I'll turn over to you, and other members from the audience outside our panel, feel free to do so. This is a very collegial media, so feel free to share or to ask questions. Gonzalo?
Let me just add of what Mr. Sakari said, which is about the collaboration. So when we talk about capabilities is about ecosystems, and ecosystems are about collaborative process. Therefore, what we need in ecosystems and a collaborative process is collaborators. If we don't have collaborators, we don't collaborate at all. So if the evaluation unit within a country is just working, producing evaluation without any collaboration and exchange and communication with other areas, then the ecosystem doesn't work and the capabilities are a problem. So we just mentioned already a very important collaborators in the ecosystem. Academia, which sometimes is already there in many places. The Ministry of Finance. I cannot think of an evaluation process being a very good process without the collaboration from the Ministry of Finance. I mean, the guys from Chile knew that from the very beginning. That's why they have the evaluation unit within the Ministry of Finance. Planning, right? It has to be another element. And sometimes planning and finance, they don't talk each other, right? And sometimes they are like who wants to be first, right? In the case of Cambodia, UNICEF had a very good idea to put together the Ministry of Finance and Planning to talk about evaluation. Congress is very important, and sometimes we forget about Congress. Congress is a very important collaboration. BOPES, and of course, as Ian and others said, and Manny said, the incentives. All this collaboration in the middle, you must have very good incentives for that collaboration to work. And building that is not easy.
Yet it needs to be done. So let's see if Manny, who raised his hands, has some solution or at least some insights. Over to you, Manny.
Oh, I wouldn't have raised my hand if you asked me for a solution. But in any case, just to follow up on what my friend Gonzalo mentioned, I think that in order for these stakeholders to interact with each other, there's one thing that a word we haven't mentioned yet in this panel that's really critical if you want to build a self-sustaining ecosystem, and that's transparency. What I found is that in some countries, they're very willing to share the results of evaluation and even the data that goes into evaluation out in the open. But there aren't so many of those countries. And without that, it's very hard to sustain an ecosystem because it's only that transparency and that somebody could actually check your work that ensures the quality of the work that we do. And I also think that, Gonzalo, you always reminded me that when you were in Coneval, you had people knocking on your door to do evaluations when you actually made transparent who it was who was getting their programs evaluated. And the public demanded, why aren't the others on this list? And so I think that transparency has to be something that is essential if we're going to have a self-sustaining ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. And this is a relatively, I mean, it's a strong word. Any rebuttal on this issue of transparency and how it plays out and how important it is or doesn't exist in any of your contexts. So opening it up to everyone, not just our panelists, any hands, or just simply sharing your views would be truly appreciated. But I'm seeing some heads being raised. So Denis, you're shaking your head, meaning you probably have something to say about transparency. So while others formulate the questions, over to you.
Yes. No, I was hoping to have the people from the group to come. But about transparency, what I want to say is, yes, it's part of maybe one of the point I made is the rule of the game. This was the Douglas North institutional approach, and the formal and informal institution that shape human interaction and give incentive to have this collaboration, to have this demand and supply that come. So for me, transparency it's come out from the system and it's come out from the rule of the game, and whether there's incentive to use evaluation, and evaluation can grow and can be part of a culture, a norm, a culture of governance that allow evaluation to grow and to thrive. So it's part of the governance maturity, whether there's a weak governance or strong governance model, the type of governance model, maybe based on many observation in Asia, there's a different type of governance model that that does not allow evaluation to thrive as much as in Latin America, for example, or so maybe there's a different type of governance model. Institution matters. Over.
Thank you to all the responses today. Funding is a critical element in building capacities and capabilities, and often it is a short-term model. It's 3 years, it's 5 years, it's organized around projects or sometimes programs, but is there a need to revisit the way in which funding is actually being done, perhaps co-funding or thinking about how governments and donors could think together how a funding model could better support both capabilities and capacities so that the short term of it doesn't become a hurdle? We are 5 years into or 6 years into the SDGs. So is there a way or a need to revisit the funding approaches? Is there anyone who want to tackle that question? Or maybe should I go with maybe a funder? So Manny, do you have any appetite for that question?
Just two observations. One is, I think to the extent that the knowledge that we generate from evaluation becomes a public good, that's a common resource for all of us. It makes it imperative to have some kind of system that actually subsidizes the production of that public good. So we have found, for example, in the multilateral development banks, that if the countries have to borrow money for this, you're not going to have enough of that knowledge because it's a public good. And so we have to find a way to make sure that, unlike other public goods, we have a way to generate the revenues collectively that will make that that knowledge easily available. And this is where private foundations have certainly helped as well, and other grant-making mechanisms, I think, would be essential.
Thank you. Any other perspectives on the funding model? Now, I have a question then maybe for Patricia. So we'll turn now to Latin America. In your session, Patricia, you mentioned that despite the successes that you have achieved, there are still some hurdles that you have faced. So could you perhaps identify one of the challenges that you've had and share with us how your government has actually addressed to actually go through that challenge? Any challenge that was big and how you managed to go through it? Over to you, Patricia.
Okay, thank you. I think that a big challenge is to bring evaluations closer to the budgetary decisions.
Can you speak closer to your mic? We have some difficulties in hearing you.
Oh, yes, sure.
Yes.
Now, can you hear me better? Okay.
Yes.
So I think that a big challenge is to bring evaluations closer to budgetary decisions. This challenge remains, but we've been trying to address it, and we are trying to reduce this challenge with a couple of actions that we are right now implementing. So one first action is that right now we socialize our evaluations at the budget discussions meetings. These meetings takes place once a year, and we are socializing our evaluations in these meetings. So for us, that's like a big step. And we are sending summary reports of our evaluations that we conduct each year. We are sending the evaluations to the interested actors, but now we are sending it also to the Ministry of Finance. So that's a way that we are trying that this ministry knows about the results and recommendations of our evaluations, and we would like them to consider those recommendations in the budgetary discussions.
Fascinating, Patricia. You're using the words actually to disseminate and make sure that your evaluations are well known by some of the other constituency. We have in the chat Celeste, who's actually sharing an initiative to make evaluation closer to people. So essentially the same objectives, ensuring that the evaluation is disseminated and achieves and reaches different audiences. Celeste, you have your hand raised, so let me just turn it over to you, either to share on the question or to build on the example you've had.
The thing is that it was about funding and challenges.
That's okay.
If I could.
That is okay.
Thank you. But I was thinking it's more a question or a reflection, but here, for example, in Argentina, and I think some neighbor countries, funding is, I think, 90% or 100% from international organizations, cooperation, development cooperation. And maybe we are not working a little bit hard, training or making a better culture of fundraising, mixed fundraising, for example, not only from development cooperation, but from private sector, public-private sector. And this is, it's more than a question or a reflection, because I think we have a lot of funding, not mixed funding, only fundings from international organizations and I think maybe we need to work on mixed funding because it can help us to appropriate and legitimate our process too. So that's all.
Thank you. And I think this is something that we've heard earlier on, the needs for attracting new funders, new funding models. There are new entrants in the ecosystem. Manny, you have your hand raised. Over to you, and that will probably be one of our last comments from the audience.
I had a question actually for Patricia, and on how bringing evaluation into budget discussions works in Colombia. Because is it that you're using evaluation to put more budget into those programs that work, or is it to put more budget into programs that need support? I just was wondering what the incentive mechanisms were and how you're actually using the budget as using evaluation in those budget decisions.
What we want is, or what we expect is to the Ministry of Finance put budget on those interventions that in some way are implementing the recommendations of our evaluations. So if we see there's an intervention that needs to be modified, we will expect that the Ministry of Finance will only put budget if that intervention include the modifications that we recommend or we suggested. That's what we are expecting. And in some cases, it has already happened, but in some others not. So that's what we need to continue strengthening our relations with the Ministry of Finance. So I mean, it's overall, we are trying to include our recommendations in the interventions. It depends on the recommendations that we have.
Thank you, Patricia. Don't forget to put your phone so we can hear you, your headset. So
Oh, sorry, but
yes.
did you hear me?
We
Sorry.
were attentive. We heard
okay.
you. We heard you. Denis, you raising your hand?
I may have a question or remark for everybody in the panel. I was wondering, I was reading recently a paper from Bob Picciotto, but was essentially was pitching the evaluation is a political enterprise. We are in the politics, we evaluate program, we're part of government or outside, but we evaluate programs. So there's politics here. And I wonder the model of evaluation that we have, different model, either done like the auditor is done internally by government and all the evaluation is done internally by civil servant, or the other model, like now in UNICEF or in Canada, we hired external consultant to do evaluation. We call them independent, but are they? So is the evaluation model of managing evaluation at the government, the ministry level, play a role? Is there a best model to enhance capabilities? I don't know if you have any thought or any comment on that. Over.
Anyone would like to provide some insights to what Denis has shared with us? Yes, Gonzalo?
That's a tough question. I don't think there's only one model, but let me just reflect on these. In some countries, we hire evaluation from academia because we don't have enough resources or capacity within the evaluation unit. Sometimes we do evaluation within, but most of them are external. We call them independent as well. One danger of that one is that the evaluator is guiding the agenda of the questions, right? Because he wants to publish a paper later. That's fine for the paper, but it's not very good for the public policy part. So we have to be careful about who's guiding the questions and who's guiding the methodology and what the evaluation is for, right? And that's the importance of the evaluation unit, trying to understand the needs and the demands from the ministries, the needs and the demands from the Ministry of Finance. As soon as the Ministry of Finance enters the game, then the whole demand changes a lot. It happened to some countries, including Mexico, that at the minute that Ministry of Finance enter the game, then sometimes they're not asking for impact evaluations because they take time and all that. They are asking for very concrete results in the next 3 months. Therefore, you need to change the way you believe. And if you only in good academics, I mean, which is fine, but then you just are biasing the process from my point of view.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And the last points from Ian. You have about a minute to wrap it up on your view, Ian. Over to you. You're muted.
In South Africa, we've been switching attention to rapid evaluations, which basically we define as you do in 6 to 12 weeks, because often you need these. You have these. If you want to influence policy, you need to be able to respond quickly. And there's been a huge amount of interest. So that's the one side of it. The other side is you can actually conduct some of those evaluations by using government staff as the main team, and then getting a professional evaluator as the team leader to run it. And in that way, you can build capacity in government to be able to do the evaluations themselves, and it can make a big difference. And in fact, on a project I worked with Thomas on building capacity in Africa to bring evaluation into the VNRs. Sierra Leone, after we ran a training, they went and did a rapid evaluation themselves with people from the Ministry of Education, and they found it extremely powerful because they were actually involved themselves in doing the evaluation. It wasn't just commissioned externally.
Thank you. I think this is probably our last comment. I just would like to encourage everyone to look. There's a lot of very good insights in the chat. People are sharing their experiences. People are giving links to things that they have done. So it's a good thing to just, just take a look at the chat and get some insights from here. As a closing note, perhaps what we can get from this webinar, there's no way, there's absolutely clear that one needs to go beyond capacity building and engage in capability building, considering the importance of building the systems. We've heard from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, different contexts that influence this ability to go from capacity to capabilities. But one thing was clear from everyone, it's hard work. It's hard work because there's issues around incentives, there's issue around immediate results that needs to be demonstrated, there's interest from the actual donor and the government. And some of the solutions, or at least some of the elements that have been brought forward to support this transfer from capacities, from capabilities, included the need for transparency. So many, this was a word I'll remember. We also talked about the need to break the silos, and the word partnership came back very often. Partnership between civil societies, government, academia, and donor agencies. Potentially also exploring different funding models or different ways or different entrants into those who are bringing money into our systems, as well as different ways of doing evaluations and different types of evaluations that will perhaps support this transition from capacity to capability building. So I would encourage everyone to look into the chat. I'll turn over to Denis for the last 2 minutes. And I'd like to thank you all for engaging and for participating in this webinar. So Denis, over to you for a last point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're just done. Thank you, everybody. So I was hoping that maybe both you and we can do the closing, because we're the co-chair of EVALSDG, Marie-Hélène. So I want to thank everybody for their very rich and insightful. I mean, for me, I think it's a topic that is endless, that's so rich, that's so angled that we can comment. And maybe it could be part of, we can think about the book or something to do about it. There's so many angles, and I see a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of brings trust around the table. So thank you, everybody. I think it's very insightful. We're going to share this recording into the GEI and into the EVALSDG web portal as well. So I want to thank you all for your participation, especially the panelists for making time for this important topic. I do appreciate every single of you.